Here we go. We are live right now with Tucker Max, best-selling author, New York Times best-selling author, 3 million books sold. And you have a very, very interesting history, right? And you were one of the original, I would say, bloggers. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I was like writing on the internet before blog was a word.
When were you writing on the internet?
I put my first stuff on the internet, I think it was like September of 2002 or maybe... Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Because I remember I was so like deep into like getting learning how to program HTML and stuff, because that was back when that was the way to post stuff. Like GeoCities was still new then. I remember I've forgotten that it was the first anniversary of 9/11. So it was right before then, so it was like late 2002.
So the timing of the content that you were putting out was not necessarily the best thing to post on the anniversary.
No, it would have been better than on 9/11, but it was still not great timing.
So, and for our demographic is typically, we sway majorly women.
Right.
If you had to say what was the type of content that you were writing back then,
right?
What would you say?
All the stuff that men and women do in their 20s. That's stupid and reckless and ridiculous, getting drunk, throwing up on yourselves, hooking up.
Yes.
I did all the same stuff everyone does. I just wrote stories about it.
That is true. And it's funny, I actually remember being in the computer lab of Longwood University and my roommate Dishner saying, "You've got to read this right now." And so we would read it and then we were hooked. How often were you actually publishing at that time? Were you publishing it, every day, every week?
Man, it was like whenever something happened, I would go write about it.
Yeah.
So,
now, back then, like analytics and stuff were hits, right?
Yeah.
You maybe had a hit counter.
Yeah, right.
What type of traffic? What type of what did you see back then?
So, I only before my big sort of jump, I was maybe 500, 1,000 hits a day.
Yeah.
So a couple hundred people maybe per day. I didn't really see anything big until I got sued by this girl, and I won. But it was like it was a big First Amendment case. It was one of the first internet sort of First Amendment cases. In fact, it was really the first. And so it was like front page of New York Times and AP Wire and everything. And I remember the site kept going down. I think I got over 100,000 hits in a day. And this is like when 40 million people were on the internet.
Right.
Like in 0102, it was like 10, 20, 30% of the American population or something. And so it was an insane amount of people. And over that week, it was like 1 million or something crazy, or millions, whatever. So it was some insane number.
Now, did GeoCities contact you at any time, or like, hey, we either don't want this, or it's way too much traffic?
No. I had so many different jerry-rigged ways of doing stuff. It was total Wild West. Like people think it's crazy now. That was really truly like rubber cement and string holding everything together.
How old were you at the time when all this was happening?
27. I started writing at 27.
27. So you already had kind of done the college thing. You went to law school, and then you had everything happen after that. You went out you got a job in
Fenwick and West in Silicon Valley, like the firm that represents Google and Facebook and whatever. They fired me after 3 weeks, so I was not very good at being a lawyer. And
so the blogs that you eventually were writing, they started off as emails, right? Email chains to friends, right?
Yeah. So I after I got fired from Fenwick and West, I went to work for my father. He has restaurants in South Florida where you're from, Max's Grill and those places.
Yep.
And then my dad fired me from the family business.
I've been fired from my family business too.
So it was depressing. And my buddies were like, well, you're not very good at law. You're not very good at business. But these emails that you've been writing us over the last year are the funniest thing I've ever seen. Because, after we left law school, it was like, you drink with your friends, you talk about it the next day. We were all in different cities, so I missed my friends. I was lonely, so I would write them emails about the dumb things I would do because I hated my life in South Florida. And they thought they were the funniest things ever. So they forwarded those around to their friends and became like email chains. And they're like, dude, this is what you're doing that's really good. You should focus on this. But it was funny. It never occurred to me that I was a writer or that writing was something I would do. And then so I tried to get my stuff published, my emails, like in a book. Every agent, every publisher, everyone, thousands of queries. And that was like when you had to like mail them, like in the postal service, like the actual mail. 100% rejection. I mean, literally 100% rejection. And so I put my stuff up on the internet for free, which is so funny. Like the emails that became the bulk, the core of a book that ended up creating a new literary genre and selling millions of copies, people whose entire job it is to find content
Right.
to publish, all rejected it.
Right.
100%. And so then I put it on the internet. It blew up. The publishers came back to me. And that was...
No, at any point were you like, nah, screw it. I can do it on my own?
I
or
did for a while,
yeah.
but that was 03, 04.
It
was still really hard to self-publish. Like,
Yeah.
it was not impossible, but it was essentially impossible.
So how long, as you're writing these blog posts,
Right.
how long until you actually say, I'm going to turn this into a book?
I knew from the beginning.
Yeah.
Not from the beginning. Once my friends told me these things are more than just emails, and then I started seeing them forwarded around to other people and forwarded back to me from other people.
Yep.
I'm like, okay, people like this. Then I was like, well, why can't it be a book? Why can't it be a movie? Why can't
Yeah.
it be whatever? Because they're just funny stories, right? Then I started getting into my head, and then it was like publishers that came back and forth, and I tried to do it myself. It just wasn't possible. Then.
Right.
Now it's super easy.
And the books
Then
were
it was
the
hard.
book was published. I Serve Beer in Hell.
I hope
they serve beer in hell.
Right.
That was published when?
2006.
2006.
January of 2006. I
And-
signed the deal in like late 04, and then it came out.
How quickly did you realize that was a hit? That was a bestseller?
First weekend. It was
weekend.
New York Times bestseller the first weekend because, excuse me, here's a great lesson for anyone out there who's thinking about writing. I had, I put up a website first because no one would publish me. And then I collected email addresses the whole time.
Yeah.
So by the time my book launched, I had like 50 or 100,000 email addresses. So I sold 5,000 copies my first week with zero press.
Right.
No one covered my book. No New York Times, nobody talked about it. And then out of nowhere, this random book hit the bestseller list because my fans bought it. Because I'd been giving my stuff away for years. You know?
Now, after that book came out and you had the success, like how long was it like? Were you riding that high? Like, you just hit New York Times bestseller. Now I'm thinking book 2, book 3, book 4. When does the movie come in the head of saying?
So the smart thing would have been to keep writing my success and writing books. And I had more books in me, but I was really excited. You get a little taste of success. You kind of want to ratchet up too quickly if you're young and arrogant and stupid like I was. And so I was like right for TV movies.
Right.
Like there's nothing wrong with going after that, but when you have a success in a certain way and a certain foundation, you want to keep building that foundation so the other things can be built on top of it.
Right.
If you try and level up too quickly, you're usually not ready. And at least I definitely wasn't. And so I spent a lot of time in Hollywood. I sold the TV show twice, didn't get made twice, rights reverted back twice. Then I finally got the movie made, and it turned out to be kind of the worst experience of my life.
So let's talk about that. So it's
Do we have to?
So you're riding this high, massive blogger, massive, following audience. You're
Right.
probably going out and people may see you like, oh,
At that
Tucker,
point,
yeah.
I'm getting kind of well known.
You're a celebrity, right?
Right. Mhm.
And so this is it's a building high at this point. And so before it even goes out, you probably, and I know nothing about movies and stuff. I'm sure you probably see it before it hits.
Well, I wrote the screenplay.
Right.
I was produced it, so I wasn't
Sure.
the only producer,
Right.
like not the expert. I was involved. I was on set filming. I mean, I was as involved as you can be.
So, and again, I could be ignorant to the whole Hollywood thing, but do you test it, or do you say tomorrow it's hitting theaters and?
Yeah, I mean,
see
we
how
had
it
a
goes?
bunch of tests. It actually tested super well.
Okay.
Like, it was amazing how well it screened. It's a funny movie in
Right.
a lot of different ways. It had problems. I mean, it's a movie that had a lot of major problems, but had a lot of funny scenes.
Right.
And then also just the way we marketed it and the way we went about everything about it was.
So, and what point from the movie release? Let's say it's going out tonight, right?
Right.
Till the results in which you said it might be one of the things.
Movie numbers almost real time.
Really?
Now. And that was 2009 it came out, so it wasn't that fun. Like we knew what was going to happen the first weekend, second weekend. Like we knew.
And so, and one of the
And it did not do well. Obviously.
one of your articles and blogs that I read said you actually cried that night when you realized that it was. And seriously, how tough was that? Like, because you had put everything into it.
I'm not a person that cries a lot. It was obviously real tough, dude. It was. Here's the problem. The problem was I had attached so much of my identity to that movie that like it wasn't that something I tried didn't work. It was like I didn't work.
Right.
And so many people do that in so much of their art is they confuse what they do with who they are.
Right.
And that's probably why it ended up being a bad movie. Quite honestly, is not probably why. It is why. Is a lot of the mistakes I made and a lot of the problems that came up making it were because I had so much tied into myself and how this movie made me look, and so much of that was unconscious.
Sure.
It really led to a lot of bad decisions that led to a bad movie. And then it was like I felt really, quite honestly, I felt really terrible about myself because I had so much of my identity wrapped up in my art. But that's really, it's a pretty bad way to make art. There's a difference between expressing yourself and seeing art as yourself.
Exactly. And so is Tucker Max done with movies for now, or do we hope to get back into them?
I mean, it's not. I'm sure I'm going back into filmed entertainment, no doubt, because the future is video and screen. I mean, obviously, right? But I'm going to do it a different way. Not just emotionally different, but also from a whole different financial position, a whole different creative position. The main thing, man, is that it took me a long time to realize that the reason I screwed up the movie is because I made it all about me. Even though my stories are about me, they were never. My stories really weren't about me.
Right.
If you read my stories, you're going to laugh your ass off. You're going to think it's hilarious, but you actually don't know much at all about me as a person, because the point of the stories are to entertain.
Yes.
Not not for me to pontificate and rant.
Sure.
I made the creation of the movie especially about me and satisfying my ego, which is really why it stunk. When I get back into film, it's going to be in a way where it's not about me. It's about creating the best art possible.
Got it. So after the movie thing happens, you kind of take a big hit. You move into other businesses, right? You started saying, are you making any more? Are you blogging anymore? Are you writing any more for?
Yeah, so I had 2 more books to finish.
Okay.
I finished those.
Okay.
They came out. They did really well.
Got it.
That was all great.
Gotcha.
That was all fun.
And then you started some other businesses after that. And how did those do after?
So one was a publishing company, because the way that book publishing works is so screwed up.
Yeah.
I kind of reversed the model. So instead of getting in advance and having a publisher like own the rights, I actually did a deal where they just distributed. I owned my own rights, and then I made all the profit on the book.
Yep.
I had to put money up front. If you have an audience, you can totally do that. It works well. It's sort of like self-publishing, except I did mainstream distribution, right? That I turned that into a company that was going to do it for other authors. I ended up selling that to somebody else because I realized I didn't want to be in that business. And then I did a couple of other sort of smaller things.
Sure.
Nothing big. And mostly I invested after that. I did a lot of angel investment, startup investment and stuff.
And then one of your blog posts I was reading said, you seem to have gotten a lot in your own way,
right?
And those businesses, et cetera. And so while you are doing those and you're doing some angel investing, you're doing well on that side.
Right.
At what point is there a point where you kind of say, you know what, this way is not working, right? This is I don't want to kind of go this way, because how you've been writing now has been a lot different, but the same at the same time than your previous. Was there ever a point during that kind of journey between, I don't know whether it was like 2009, 2012, that you kind of like shifted a little bit? Do you remember anything like that? Because I know meeting your wife's was a big deal, but was there anything before that was kind of like, this is kind of not working for me? Yeah,
I mean, well, after the time you brought it, like when the movie did poorly and I got upset, I cried, whatever. Like it was one of those things that became sort of the spark that set off a whole series of events. And basically, what happened in my life is I had to realize after that I don't want to say I went in search of happiness, but I was pretty miserable, and so I fixed everything.
Yes.
In my life. And once I feel like everything external, like I was already in good shape. I got in amazing shape. I already ate well. I even better, whatever. I made money. I got to this point maybe about 2 or 3, 4 years after the movie where like I had everything I ever thought I wanted and way more.
Right.
And I wasn't miserable anymore. I'm way better than when I was poor and starting off, but I wasn't really that happy.
Sure.
And so once you deal with everything external, still not happy, you got to kind of turn that inwards. You got to realize maybe it's me. Right. And so for me, it was I then had to kind of go on a road of not discovery, more healing.
Sure.
First I had to accept, okay, the problem's inside of me. Now I've got to fix it. Now and I got to ask for help. Like no man is an island. No man, you can't fix yourself. Even if you're doing things to help yourself, someone else is guiding you. You're getting help a lot of places. It's for me, there's a lot of ways to kind of fix yourself or to help yourself. For me, it started with therapy.
Yep.
And it started with psychoanalysis was the specific modality I used. It worked really well with me.
And could you just explain psychoanalysis
so
real quick?
Psychoanalysis, it's a specific type of talk therapy.
Right.
It's pretty intense.
Everybody should talk to somebody.
Right. It's just a specific type.
Right.
And there's a lot of different types. This way, it tends to be very analytical, hence analysis. It's very much, you're with another person, you're 4 days a week. And it's very much talking through your issues, usually not directly, usually kind of indirectly. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Why? Like that kind of stuff. And then you kind of come to understand yourself, connecting the conscious, the unconscious,
right.
all that kind of stuff. And it worked really well. It wasn't a panacea, though. It didn't solve all my issues. So then the next sort of, it's kind of like stacking skills on top of each other. I stacked therapy modalities on top of each other. So the next thing I really kind of got into was I tried yoga for a while, and it's like this is crappy meditation and crappy exercise combined. Yep. Didn't work for you. Yeah, it didn't work for me. So I tried to separate the two things out. I already exercised, but tried just meditation. And at first I was like, meditation's easy. You just block everything out, right? That's not doing it right. Totally wrong. So once
So what did you start with, like when you say meditation? Because I kind of had a similar journey. You kind of start looking it up, and you're like, where do I start? Like, what did you do?
So, normally I start with reading stuff. So I read a bunch of stuff, and I was like, I'm not an expert on meditation, obviously, but most of what's written about it seems like nonsense to me.
Okay.
Or it seems like trying to explain the unexplainable, right?
Yes.
At best.
Yes.
And so I actually ended up going back to primary sources. So instead of reading a bunch of what other people say the Buddha said, you can actually just read, it's like, don't listen to your preacher, go read the fucking Bible.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
if you're a Christian, read Christ's words. If your meditation started with, at least as I understand it, the Buddha was one of the first people who really kind of systematized it. Not right or wrong, but at least start there. So I read some primary sources, and it seemed like the way to meditate, it was very clear. He explains it very clearly, and everything after that just seems like commentary, right? It's not right or wrong. Some people love it, great, no problem. I didn't need anything more than basic instructions, lotus position, spine upright, blah, blah, focus on your breath, and then, recognize your thoughts, accept them, no judgment, let them have their say. It was more than enough for me.
Yeah.
The thing that really struck is sort of like, it's not enough to know the Buddha's teachings. You must walk the Buddha's walk or whatever. The point is you got to actually do it yourself.
Right.
That's the only way to learn it.
I had a similar kind of thing that happened because I was talking to a friend about meditation. She kind of directed me into a specific way, but I would try and talk to her. She was like, no. She was like, these are questions and answers you need to figure out yourself. And I said, well, what about, is there any books I should be reading, et cetera? And she said, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
The only answer you can find is within yourself, and that's the way to go.
Right. So I... Right, like I said, at first it seemed easy, but that was just blocking everything out. And then once I stopped doing that, then it's actually crazy hard meditation is.
Yeah.
How hard could it be to sit there by yourself and focus on your breath for 20 minutes or an hour? It's actually really hard.
Yeah.
If you're doing it right, it's something so simple to understand is actually incredibly hard, which I think why so many people want to make it complex to avoid the actual work itself.
How do you feel about the current trend in tech, which is trying to systematize meditation?
Well, you know what they usually talk about mindfulness, because that's it's sort of like it's like we're gonna exercise but not sweat.
Right.
I don't know how you separate mindfulness from meditation. I'm not the expert, but it seems to me like all those people are kind of figuring out a way to meditate without actually having to sit quietly with yourself.
Yes.
Oh, well, if I just focus on this, then it's the same thing. It's not the same thing.
It's not the same thing.
It's total BS.
Yes.
It's not to say that like you can't use
it's a good relaxing tool, right? It's a good you'd much rather have somebody looking at a thing of, a stream that's flowing rather than killing somebody, right? But just watching that is actually, you're not fixing things.
It seems like an avoidance tool.
Yes.
It's a way to avoid the actual work, And it's not that like apps or whatever can't help you, whatever,
but they can become a crutch. They can become a
way to avoid, yeah. I mean, it seems to me the ones who read the most books, who know the most about meditation, are often the ones who don't actually. You feel like, man, you don't seem like someone who actually is meditating. You don't seem that centered or that calm, or whatever.
Right. Now, was there any point? So you started meditating, psychoanalysis.
Those two worked well together.
Yeah,
because you're going at the same goal from totally opposite directions.
Yes.
One is talk therapy. One is self-reflection.
Yes.
And between those two, there's almost nowhere for your problems to escape, which actually is really hard because then all the stuff you've run from your whole life is coming up.
So, and we just talked about, don't listen to people when they tell you what to meditate. But because I get this question all the time, how do I start? And I usually kind of either point them in the direction, whether it's Buddhism or whether it's just like a meditation practice or et cetera, and I just kind of leave it up to them because I'm not going to sit there with them and do that. That's, it's something you have to do. When people approach you and say, how should I start meditating or what should I do? What's Tucker Max's take?
You're going to think this is very condescending, but it's seriously not. I tell them, do you have 5 minutes that you can spare? Yeah, of course. Okay, for the first week, 5 minutes, sit in a chair or sit cross-legged on the floor, on a pillow, wherever is more comfortable with you. But those two, like, make sure your spine's up. Like, although I actually started for the first 6 months laying down, it was way easier for me until I transitioned up. But I'm like, do it for 5 minutes, and like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That I'm like, if you try more, you're gonna set yourself up for failure. If you can go 5 minutes a day for a week, then do 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Then do 10. Then do 12. Then 15. Then 18, then 20, because you're going to create that momentum and whatever. And like, well, how do I do? I'm like, sit in a quiet room by yourself, eyes closed, breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth, and focus on your breath. Like literally focus on inhaling, focus on exhaling, feel it. What'll happen is all these crazy things are going to come to your head. Don't push them away. I tell them the acronym I always use is, because easy to remember, is RAIN. So recognize the thought, accept the thought, allow yourself to investigate the thought, and have no judgment of the thought, or of yourself, or even of the thought. Like it could be a crazy thing or painful or anything. Let it, just examine it as a thing that's going on in your head. Don't judge yourself, whatever. And eventually, whenever you can, just come back to focusing on your breath.
Yes.
As much as you can, but don't force it. Like you can't push the thought away. It's got to have its space, right? And just do that. And they're like, it can't be that simple. It really is. Right. Everything else you'll figure out on your own.
It's funny. It's simple yet hard at the same time.
It's really hard to do.
And life is all about those paradoxes. It's simple yet hard.
It's simple to understand, but hard to actually
Now, was there any experience when you first started meditating, whether it's like the first couple of weeks or anything, is there any kind of shift that Tucker had where it was like you had a great experience and it was like, wow.
It wasn't great. It was bad, but it was a shift. It was one of the great, I think, Buddhist scholars, Pema Chodron, has this quote: if you haven't cried when you're meditating, you haven't meditated. And I didn't really understand what she meant until I was like 4 or 5 months, 6 months into meditation. I started meditating, and I'll never forget the very first time I meditated. I was it was in this apartment in what used to be my bedroom, and my dog came up, and she I heard this and I felt this like air, and I opened my eyes and she was right on top, like looking out, because she was kind of confused, like you don't normally lay on the floor like this, what's going on? And I was like, no, Murph, it's okay. And she sniffed me and she's like, all right. And then she laid next to me, right? And so she used to always lay next to me when I was meditating, and then a few months later she died, and it was very painful. Like I was very close to her, and I kept meditating, whatever. And then about 3 months or 4 months after she died, I was meditating. And I thought I processed her death, but whatever. I grieved. And man, I'm telling you, it fucking just came.
Yeah.
Heaving, convulsing sobs. Probably the most I've ever cried in my life about anything. Maybe going back to when I was like an infant or something. I mean, it was crazy. And it was not fun going through it, but I stayed with it.
You stayed with it, went through it.
Stayed with it.
And kind of felt the sadness the whole way through.
I let it have its sort of say, and I'm gonna be sad the rest of my life that she's gone.
Right.
But it was really I had not done, and you have to do that. I had not processed the emotion or even dealt with it at all, and then I've had a few other things like that, but that was really the time where I was like, fuck, man, this is powerful. This is no joke.
I have I know that it's possibly going to happen to me because I have a little Brodie. She's 5 pounds. Actually, she's 6 pounds. She's morbidly obese. She's 6 pounds. She's supposed to weigh 5 pounds. And anytime I go to meditate at home and she's around, she comes and sits on my lap. And so it's funny as I go into it, I'm like,
cat or dog?
It's a dog. Okay. And I know that I'm going to eventually have to process that at some point. So I appreciate you sharing that. So now you're meditating, now you're psychoanalysis. And so let's maybe fast forward to kind of, a couple years ago, right? In one of your articles, you actually said that you wanted to start something meaningful. So it almost kind of feels like this kind of, I hate to be cliche, but like this hero's journey, this warrior's journey. You kind of built it up, got knocked down, and then now you're kind of like looking back, kind of scarred and saying, I'm going to do something meaningful this time. And so what was driving that meaningfulness behind it?
Well, the thing, it's funny. I want to, not to be like a semantic about words, but you said you wanted to start something meaningful. It's actually not true. That's the old way, I would think, is I want to start something meaningful because I want a thing, I want to do that thing,
Gotcha.
right? It was actually not. It was more I want to do something that is meaningful, which are different things, dude. Like you think, what's the difference? It's actually a big difference.
Sure.
If you're doing something meaningful, that means there's actual action that's happening, and it's not necessarily you doing it. It's just you're involved in something meaningful. Start something meaningful is like I need. It's more of a narcissistic thing. I have to be careful. You probably don't have that issue. I have to be careful of thinking that way.
Okay.
If I get back into old patterns, I can always tell if I am. But so the thing is, I didn't go out looking for it because if you go looking for it, it's just not. You can't force that, right? And so it's what I'm doing now. My company, Book in a Box, it totally fell into my lap. And I think it's so funny. It's so hard to see the impact of the work you do. It's sort of like working out. If you're like kind of fat, you go to the gym once, has no impact, right? But if you go to the gym every day or whatever, 3 days a week for 3 months, you all of a sudden you look in the mirror and you're like, holy shit, I've got abs. Where the fuck did these abs come from, right? And I feel like therapy and meditation work the exact same way. Like you feel like nothing's happening and you're just frustrated with it and you're just like, ugh, this is the worst. And then all of a sudden, something that used to not work or be terrible or opportunities you never had are all of a sudden right there in your face, right? And it happened, this is exactly how it happened to me. So I was at an entrepreneurial dinner and this woman asked me the same question that I've been asked ever since the first day I published a book. What's your book about? Okay, great. I don't care. What I really want to know is how do I write a book?
Right.
Right. And so she's like an entrepreneur and really busy. She's like, I don't have time to sit at a computer for a year. How else can I get a book done? And I was like, are you asking me how to write a book without writing it? And she's like, yeah. And so I kind of went back into my old sort of elitist bullshit nonsense ways. Lecturing her about hard work and the writer's life and all this nonsense. And so she eventually stopped me. She's like, this is an entrepreneur dinner. Are you an entrepreneur? I said, yeah, of course. She's like, I don't know. Because I am an entrepreneur. I spend all day helping people solve their problems. Are you going to lecture me about hard work or help me solve my problem? And I was like, it was such a gut punch. Because she was totally right. I was totally being a judgmental, arrogant prick. And so I had to reframe the entire thing. How do I get, she knows what she's talking about. She's very smart and accomplished. She doesn't want to sit at a computer for a year typing. How do I didn't think it was possible.
Right.
Like there's no other way to write a book other than write it. Until it occurred to me, Socrates never wrote a word down. Plato never wrote, or Buddha never wrote a word down. Jesus never wrote, Malcolm X. All these brilliant men and women who basically laid the foundations of Western culture had scribes who wrote their words down. They said these things, they thought them, but someone else put it on the paper. Why can't we create a different sort of system, right? Yeah. Again, it's about not thinking about me. It's about thinking about the actual thing. Like, are we going to help this person or not, right? And so I kind of hacked this process together. I honestly didn't think it was going to work. But it was just a way to like, I know story really well. I know books well. So I was like, all right, how do I structure her? How do I interview her, structure her idea, create an outline, get the content out of her head through interviews, and then kind of, turn it into a transcript and then edit it into a book. So we tried it and it worked great. Yeah. This amazing book came out of her because she knew what she was talking about. She just didn't know how to do all the details of putting her knowledge into a book, which I did. And so it worked amazing. And then like if I don't necessarily believe in a lot of supernatural stuff, but if I believed in like all of that, I'd have been like the universe absolutely decided this was going to be a thing.
Yeah.
Once I let myself see it,
yeah.
and I made it not about me and about being a writer, but about solving a problem for a person. Then like all of a sudden, dude, she referred a bunch of people. I did a podcast where I talked about the process. I did a podcast about something totally different. Talked about this. Incidentally, like 5 people called me up, signed up, paid money for it. We did like $200,000 in sales before this was even a company.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. I felt, honestly, I felt stupid because for a decade, people have been asking me, how do I get my ideas into a book? And my answer had always been elitist snobbery.
Yeah.
When there was a way. There was no I didn't invent some technology that didn't exist.
Right.
There was always a way. I just didn't put it together. I was too stuck in myself to do that. And once I got out of the way, then now we're a year and a half, 2 years old. We've done about 250 books. And some of these books have like saved lives, literally changed people's all we are is the conduit to get the ideas out of people's heads into books. We're not the ones writing the books. Someone else gets all the credit, as they should. It's their books, right? But
how do you compare yourself now, just in terms of the work that you're doing now, as opposed to 10 years ago, et cetera? Do you find yourself?
I was writing books about my life. There's nothing more selfish to do, which I don't even want to say it like as a disparaging thing, like what I was doing is wrong or bad.
Right.
I don't think it was at all. But when you're an entertainer who tells stories about yourself, what's funny is if you actually read the books, I'm telling you, there's stories about what I did, but you laugh. They are about the reader because because everything in the book is about making the reader laugh or making them entertained, right? So I was actually really good at that. The problem is I got caught up in everything around it, and I thought I was writing successful books because I was such a genius. It's not true. I had a specific skill that I was pretty good at, and I worked hard on to develop, and that's why I was successful. And as soon as I thought it was like, I thought my shit didn't stink.
Right.
Nonsense. And I kind of lost my way. That's why the movie failed. And I could have done a lot more with that part of my life if I had been centered, and I wasn't. Now, I kind of had to fail at that to learn. Now the company's like, dude, I already fired myself as CEO of my own company because I wasn't a good manager.
Yeah.
Like I was great at building this process and great at kind of coming up with it and getting us to a certain point. But like if we're going to actually scale and be a great company, we had to bring in someone who was way better than me. And that actually, I thought I was like, oh yeah, I'm all meditation, I'm all great. And I wasn't as good as I thought.
It's a journey. It's a journey.
Yeah, it was hard. And but thankfully I learned it quick enough we identified the right guy. He was a client of ours.
So you're no longer the CEO of Book and Box. You have somebody.
No. I'm still. Obviously, I founded it.
Yeah.
And I still work in the company. Now I'm basically the CMO. I'm the chief marketing officer. Like the thing I'm good at is what I spend all my time doing. Instead of I have to be the boss and I have to have the title. He was a client of ours, and he'd already built a huge company. He loved what we were doing. He's like, "This is amazing.
Yeah.
You guys are sitting on a rocket ship." And long story short, it was hard for me to swallow that, but it was actually the way I did it, man. It's almost like a phrase. I should probably put it on my wall. It's like, when I make it about me, I fail. When I make it about us, I succeed. When it's not about me, we succeed, right?
It's funny because, and I'll share something too. We've been going on 5 years now, and it's been on my mindset too I've got us here to 5 years, right? Am I the right person to take us to 10 years, 15 years? And it's something, I don't know the answer to that, but I know it's something I'm starting to contemplate on now too, which is it's a very hard pill to swallow, and it's very interesting, and it's all part of that journey. You mentioned the movie, and I keep bringing the movie up, but this is the last question I'll ask you about it, which is, do you think that in your writings and what you're saying, it was like one of the worst things that happened to you? Do you think it actually was one of the best things to happen to you?
So it's like the paradox thing, right? I'm never going to sit here and be like, oh boy, I'm super glad that this awful, painful, terrible thing happened to me, right? But long term, it was probably the best thing that could have happened to me as a human. Because I'll tell you, if that movie had succeeded, I would have been stuck in my life. You would have never been able to tell. No one would have ever been able to tell me anything ever again. I would have really thought that I would have become one of those people. You've met these guys, and it usually happens to guys, not as much to women. Like, you met the guys who like still dress like they did 20 years ago, and still like they peaked, and then they never evolved. That.
Yeah.
I think I would have become just like that. I think I had to really suffer a painful failure, and I had to learn that it was my fault in order to go through the changes that needed to happen for me to kind of make that leap to the next level. And because of that, I went through all the painful work, my wife is an amazing woman, never would have been into me if I'd not gone through all that work. We wouldn't be married. If I had kids, it'd probably be with some terrible person out of wedlock. It'd be some nonsense, like some broken family. Who wants that? I never would have started this company. It never would have gotten to the level it is. I might have been successful at something else, but it would have been the type of success where, like, I know a lot of really successful people, and most of them are really unhappy. And I would have defined success before as money made, popularity, fame, wealth, status.
Yeah.
Now I define success as the first most important thing is, do I have great relationships with the people I love? And the second thing is, am I doing work that matters to the world and to the people I care about? And if the answer to both of those is yes, then I'm a success, and everything else is cream. Like, I'm never going to be like, oh man, I'm really pissed off that I have a lot of money or something, or I made a bunch of money. I'm not going to be upset about it, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know anything else really that like I need, that money's going to get me that I don't have.
Sure.
Like, I would love to fly private, but if I never do, it's not a big deal. Right? There's always things to get.
Sure.
But there's things that would be nice to have, not things I need to be happy.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. Now, do you find that, and I find myself doing this too, do you find that Tucker is, how do I put this? Do you beat yourself up a lot?
Yes.
You
Way
do.
too. It took me a long time to actually accept this. It's funny you're talking about this, because I was talking about this with somebody the other day. I'm pretty hard on other people. Anyone you ever meet who's really hard on other people is it because they're really hard on themselves. And that's sort of their way of externalizing it or dealing with it. Yeah, and then in other ways, I'm not hard enough on myself, you know?
Sure.
Like, I'm not honest enough. But yeah, I'll tell you.
Has that always been the case since you know, the start, like, after college, or has it been more?
I mean, anyone who has an outsized, really extreme drive for any sort of success, but especially fame, is trying to fill a hole in their soul. I'm no different. Same thing. I'll tell you what's really helped me get this under control and face it is having a son, because like a son is like a mirror and a sponge, man. A kid, any kid, daughter would be the same thing. Like, if I'm too hard on him, it's like if I'm too hard on myself, you know, whatever, right? And if I'm too hard on maybe other people, adults, it's like I can rationalize that. You can't rationalize it with a kid, man. Like, and you can see it if you're honest with yourself and you're willing to look at it. You can see when you hurt that kid, even if you're not trying to.
Right, exactly.
Right, like, if you yell or whatever, you can see it on their face.
When you either raise your voice, you do something, and they turn and look at you, and just and the lip comes out. It's just like, oh shit,
that fear and that sadness and whatever.
Yeah.
And man, if that doesn't break your heart and inspire you to change, then nothing on earth will. You know.
So the one question I actually had it's a selfish question, which is while you're doing a meaningful business, you have a meaningful drive, you could say. How do you separate? What's the difference between that and being emotionally attached to something? So you want to do something meaningful, but how do you balance that with being?
That's a great question.
Emotionally attached?
So here's the way I try and do it: is I focus on being emotionally attached. The ultimate goal is to non-attachment, right? Like, I'm not a Buddhist in the mystical sense, but definitely as an ethical system to approach life, I think it's fantastic. But I'm still human, so I'm still attached to things. So what I try to do is be attached to the process. Like, get up every day, do things you love, do things to work on that matter, and make sure they're directionally correct. And the result will take care of itself.
Right.
if I stay attached to working the process every day, then I'm going to end up creating great results that matter to me and matter to the world. If I focus on the result, then I'm usually I'm going to be distracted and not do the process. There's a great like a Zen saying about this. Like, if you want the trophy, aim at the target, stare at the target, focus on it, aim at it, you'll hit it and get the trophy. But if you if you focus on the trophy, you won't see the target, you'll miss it, and you get nothing. It's kind of like one of those paradoxes, right? You've got to, if you're gonna be attached to the work itself, not the result that the work produces.
No, that's absolutely excellent. And because I would even say in the beginning days of Alternative Daily, it was more of, like you said, being attached, to the trophy. And more recently, over the past couple of years, it's been let's focus on the target. Let's focus on actually changing people for the better, or helping them change for the better. So, in kind of keeping with this this meaningful theme, there's a current event that's actually happening right now with, and if you're not familiar with it, Hulk Hogan actually is suing Gawker over.
He won.
And we've covered it on the site, but basically he had a sex tape
hold on. Someone recorded him having sex with a woman without his knowledge and permission, at least supposedly.
It was Bubba the Love Sponge and his wife, and that tape got leaked to Gawker, and we're stepping over a whole bunch of different things, right? But just to get to it, but Gawker's not known.
They put it up on the internet.
They put it up on the internet and everything. Gawker's not known for necessarily being a place that wants to produce positive change and build people up, right? There is some good reporting out of there. They do cover some news, etc. But it seems a lot of snarky reporting. It seems a lot of arrogant type of things. Now, as someone who has wrote some, how do I do this? As somebody who wrote some very polarizing stuff, right? What is Tucker's take?
Dude, I've been in the crosshairs at Gawker for a long time. Like, they've published all the worst shit anyone's ever said on me on the internet. Has basically been on Gawker.
So, where that snarkiness comes from, it can produce a very toxic environment, right? So, and then on top of this, you have it just kind of gets even more complex. You have Peter Thiel, who's actually funding, because it costs Hogan money to run this thing, et cetera. So now you have a tech founder from Silicon Valley who is actually funding Hulk Hogan's case because we're going down the rabbit hole, because Gawker had outed him a couple years ago, which it brings up this kind of, you could call it a moral dilemma. You could call it a dilemma of, there is the right to free speech, but then there's also the right to privacy. And I don't want to get your take on that.
Well, so, like, I actually don't understand what the dilemma is. It's perfectly legal to finance, third-party finance litigation. In fact, it's a massive industry in this country, because when you have a huge evil corporation, a lot that hurts someone, a lot of times you've got to get outside money to fight them, right? That's if you like Erin Brockovich, you like third-party financing of litigation, because she got people to finance her litigation, whatever. So I think there's no problem with that. So that system itself. And there's not an issue here of free. I don't understand the issue. It's not like Gawker paid the jury to convict, or Peter Thiel paid the jury to convict Gawker.
Right.
Like, Gawker released, without permission, a sex tape of someone, right? They broke a lot of pretty clear laws. A jury convicted them. A separate panel of judges upheld the conviction, right? So Peter Thiel didn't buy any of those people.
Right.
He just paid for the lawyers to present that in court. He could have lost. Yeah. If what Gawker had done, if our community and our judges and our juries thought what Gawker did was cool, they could have just ruled in favor of Gawker.
Right.
And then this wouldn't be a controversy. It's not a free speech issue. There is no free speech issue at all. In fact, this is the antithesis of a free speech issue, because they actually did release the tape.
Right.
No one says free speech should not have any consequences. They say you should be able to say what you want. And then sometimes you got to pay the piper, man.
Right.
Right. And this is not some crazy runaway jury. This is a really well-established principle of law. Most people thought Gawker would lose. Right? That's why they tried to negotiate a settlement multiple times before the case went to trial. The reason Hulk Hogan didn't have to take a low settlement is because Peter Thiel was bankrolling it.
Right.
I think it's amazing. I think it's fantastic. I think people should have to suffer consequences of their actions, both good and bad. And that's what's happening here. There's no free speech issue. When you break the law, sometimes you're going to be held. When you're a bully, sometimes someone needs to step up and punch you in the nose back, and that's what happened.
Do you see Gawker, because they're doing the whole appeal process? Do you see Gawker maybe changing their tone going forward, or do you think it's just going to continue to be a very biased outlet?
They're always going to be who they are. The question is, how far do they push it now?
Yeah.
They're going to lose the appeal. I think this is going to end up. Denton's going to have to end up selling this and somehow portioning off the. We'll see how far this gets. I would be shocked if Hogan doesn't end up getting some large portion of the money. They're basically going to have to liquidate the assets and sell the IP to another media company.
Right.
I think it's fantastic, man. Like, it shows media is not beyond the reach of the law. You know, like that you can't just do anything you want to people. That's not okay.
We're very careful when we publish anything. So
it's not okay.
Right.
It's not okay. And no one has ever said that, oh, yeah, free speech doesn't mean there's no consequence. That's really all. You know what's crazy about this? Think about this. A gay man helped a working class hero fight a large corporation, yet somehow people are trying to make this an issue of like free speech and trying to paint Gawker as the small, scrappy. Gawker's a $200 million a year company.
Right.
They're a large evil corporation. You know, say what you want about. I mean, Peter Thiel's a gay man. Hulk Hogan is a working class hero. If you believe in America, it seems like the side you should. They're fighting for the freedom for Americans to have sex in their own homes and not have to have it broadcast anywhere they want. If you're to me, there's no question what side you take. I don't know. That's where I come down on that.
No, that's good, and because that's what I've been thinking as well. It's at what point can we and privacy does go into it, right? At what point does if somebody coming in taking a video of me and then posting it somewhere and somebody saying, hey, Jake talked about sex one time on a podcast, so we can actually go out with it. So. I understand it. So, and then let's take another hard right real quick as we're kind of wrapping this up, going into kind of meaningful work.
Right.
There's a pretty meaningful job that's up for grabs in November, right? And there's at this moment in time, there's 3 candidates, you could say maybe 2.
Right.
I actually want to just get Tucker Max's take on the current, United States presidential candidacy and the election.
Right. I mean, so from what angle? Because there's so many angles to look at this.
So, let's actually play off the meaningful thing, because I think as we evolve, this is something I actually, and I hate the word believe, but I'd like to see, which is I do believe we're evolving to a better place. This is something I have kind of this understanding of. And so the current candidate, and we just ran an article on this yesterday, of 70% of Americans just aren't happy with it.
Right.
And so I'll ask a direct question. Do you think that there is an opportunity, although it might be late, for a third party candidate to rise?
Not realistically. Maybe. I think it's entirely possible that Hillary Clinton, just talking about politically, tactically, totally possible that she gets indicted prior to the Democratic convention, and the Democrats end up. I don't think they're going to go with Sanders for a lot of tactical reasons. It's going to be tough for a Northeast Jew to win a national election, just tactically, not anything about my opinion about him or whatever. But I could see them bringing in like a Biden-Warren ticket.
Yeah.
She would have to be indicted, though. Like, I could absolutely see the Democratic machine doing that. And then those two come in without having to have to go through the slog of primaries, whatever. And they're a lot more palatable compared to Trump than Hillary is. And I think I could see them doing that. And in fact, if I was just from a tactical perspective, like a Machiavellian perspective, if I was a Democratic, a high-level Democrat, that's what I would try and make happen.
Now, it's something I get asked to regarding kind of the Trump-Clinton thing, especially Sanders. I'm not voting for Trump, but the one thing, and it kind of gets brought up, which is, he says what's on his mind, etc. Right. And that can be dangerous when you're dealing with, other, major foreign people. The one nice thing though about it is because how many times have you seen politicians get asked certain questions and they just kind of duck and dodge, and he'll come out. So there is a little bit of a benefit to kind of seeing what's behind the those eyeballs in there. But what you're getting is something that's not necessarily palatable to some foreign leaders.
Yeah, I think both Trump and Clinton are both monsters for totally different reasons and in very different ways. I think either one is a minor disaster as a president, to be quite honest.
Do you think either of them last 4 years? I mean, last more than 4 years?
No. I'd be shocked. But the thing that is really interesting to me is what this election, I think, is showing. You talk about we're evolving to a better place. I think actually Trump and Sanders are showing that people, I think, are finally fed up with the bullshit of the system.
Sure.
And I think almost everyone voting for Trump, just like almost everyone voting for Sanders, are not voting for either of those two. They're voting for the opposite of the normal system.
Yeah.
Right?
And do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing?
I've always said my whole life, you can't change the system, you have to build a new one. And I don't think, not that I think we need to tear down the United States, but I think our current two-party system and the way that our government has created this massive unelected bureaucracy is a disaster. And I think that system has to be dismantled. And it's nothing at all like the system this country was founded on. It's nothing at all like the founders intended.
Yeah.
And so I have no problem evolving to a different way to run America. And there's a lot of different options.
Do you think in the grander scheme of things, this is actually good for the country?
Yes. Like if you think the status quo is great, then I feel like you aren't paying attention. I can't stand Trump or Sanders, to be honest. But the thing, like we were talking about this before, I feel like Sanders actually believes what he says. Sure. He is a sincere man.
Yes.
And although he would run a taco stand into the ground if he had a job, nonetheless, at least I think he's sincere,
yes.
right?
Yes.
Trump, I think, is an utter disaster as a human, a deep narcissist, all these awful things. But at least he's like the monster that's like, okay, at least he admits he's a monster, right? Clinton doesn't even have a personality. She'll just be anything.
Right.
She's a liar and a cheat and a fraud and like the worst craven kind of politician that exists. And so like I would rather a monster tell me it's a monster than pretend it's not, right? And which I think a lot of people, that's what they're appealing to, and that's what they're drawn to in Trump. Is like at least he's honest about his nonsense, right? No, I think I'm not worried at all about him if he's elected being like destroying the country. The president has so little power compared to what people think, and in a weird way, I think it might be good because if we're gonna elect, like it's like one of those things where it's like, okay. The country is going to show the established ruling elites, we're tired of your bullshit, and we're going to elect the worst person we can think of.
Right.
Now you can deal with him for 4 years.
Right.
Now let's all galvanize around this awful person. Now you've got to listen to us, and now you've got to affect real change. Because we'll this is how serious we are. We put a narcissistic, idiotic clown in the White House to show you our disdain for the system.
Right.
And so then maybe he actually does a terrible job and no war is going to start. It's nonsense. But like he does a terrible job and the next time it paves the way for someone like Mark Cuban or Michael Bloomberg or someone who's like really smart who actually will do things.
Sure.
Because now that person can't, the way the system is, it's so broken and messed up, that person can't get elected. They wouldn't even run. But now after Trump, it's like, okay, like now the people are seeing, like stepping up and being like, all right, I know the Republicans or Democrats are just different sides of the same awful, monstrous union of just elites trying to keep power.
Yeah, and it's something that you see with the right-hand side, how they were trying to get a third-party candidate and somebody that wasn't Trump. And if you actually look at Clinton, she's not that far off of being a Republican, so you don't know why they wouldn't rally around her. But it's just the party line too. And I actually hope that this election destroys those party lines, because
that would be great.
Because it's so, even though she's more Republican than probably even Trump, they just won't rally around her.
You know what I care about? I care about humans.
Yes.
I don't care about parties.
I like it.
And I think what this election might do is shift away or even destroy the tribalism of politics, which that's almost like trying to go against human nature in a weird way. But I don't know, man. There's got to be a better way.
Yeah. Do you sit this one out?
I haven't voted ever in my life.
Oh, okay.
No one has ever inspired me,
and that's fair enough,
to register and go vote for them. No one. Like the closest I ever came was Obama, but I knew he was just another Democrat. And it turns out I was right. Like I knew he was like a great campaigner, and he tapped into something real.
He did,
but he was a fraud. He's just another Democrat, dude. Like he's just another Democrat, and it's like. And I would never consider myself Democrat or Republican. It's just, is there someone I would follow? And I knew Barack. I played basketball with him in college. Like, he was a professor at the University of Chicago when I was an undergrad there.
Was he good?
Yeah, he's actually, for a professor, he was really good. Not good, like good, but good for a professor. And a very nice guy. But I wouldn't follow that guy. I would barely follow that guy to a restaurant, much less, And
that's the thing is, and this is what I'm afraid of, is everybody kind of builds these politicians up as greater than God type of deal, and it's not true, and that's very scary.
Yeah.
So hard right, 2 questions left. What about Tucker Max? What does he do in his free time? Like, what you have a child, you have another one on the way. What do you do for fun?
I don't no, because I'll tell you, my fun is the 2 things I do. I love my family. I love spending time with my wife and kid. Like, it's genuinely enjoyable to me.
Yep.
So that's half my time or whatever. And the other half is the work I do.
Do you find there's this big question of work-life balance? Does that exist for you?
No.
Is it they're just kind of like intermingled?
That doesn't make sense to me, because work-life balance implies that you don't like work, so you need to balance that out with something else. I do shit I like.
Yeah.
I like what I do. Like, my job is learning and thinking and doing things, talking about things.
Sure.
Like, I mean, I would have this conversation with you without a mic, you know? So, like, I like this, so I've constructed my life, so I just do things I like. I don't need hobbies.
Jeff Bezos just said, same thing you did, but he said he actually likes the work-life harmony, which is just if you love what you do on both sides, everything is better.
Exactly it, right. Like, I love reading and learning. It's part of my job.
Yeah.
I love, whatever, teaching people. I teach my kid everyday stuff. Like, I mean, I have interests outside of my family and my work, but they're not, like, I spend all my, the only other thing I do, I guess, I take care of myself. I work out, I sleep, whatever, but.
Gotcha.
I mean, why would you not make your life the things you love doing?
That's awesome.
What the hell else is
Are we stopping at 2 or are we going for more?
Kids?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. She wants at least 3 or 4.
Really? Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, listen, once you're past 2, it doesn't matter.
I don't know.
The marginal addition of more
3.5 is tough.
Yeah.
It scarred me.
No, we have money. We love kids.
That's awesome.
I love family. So it's like, why would we not? Why the fuck else do I have money? Especially because we can buy time.
Yeah.
We already have a maid and a household manager, part time. We can have live-ins. I can afford it.
Right. Sure.
So we can spend our time working on things we love and being with the kids.
Building your little tribe. I like it.
There you go.
Last question. So there's always this cliche question of what would your 20-year-old self what would your 40-year-old self say to your 20-year-old self?
Right.
I want to reverse that, because I often say the same thing too, which is it comes up a lot in my life now, which is I'm a completely different person than I was, 20, 21, 22. Mm-hmm. So I always say that my 21-year-old self wouldn't even say anything and punch me right in the face. So what would Tucker Max at 25, 26 say to Tucker Max today?
Me at 25, 26 would not totally believe I had all the success I had. In fact, would arrogantly be like, man, you didn't leverage that movie well. You didn't, whatever, right? Would have criticized it, but would have been like, oh, dude, why did you get married? Like, why did you whatever? Why don't you just keep banging a bunch of girls or whatever? My 25-year-old self was extremely unevolved, right? And I don't mean it critical of myself then. I had a great time.
Sure.
But like I couldn't even have conceived of who I was going to become at that time.
Sure.
So I wouldn't even have been able to relate to myself now. It just would have been like, I wouldn't have known how to, there's just no bridge I could have seen
Sure.
getting there, you know?
Sure.
But I feel like I'm emotionally like 10 years behind where someone should be at my age. So like at 26, you really should think of me as like a really smart, advanced 16-year-old, you know? Like, for real. Like, I married a woman who's 10 years younger than me, and we're at the same emotional level. I'm just a slow developer, slow learner. When I get there, I get there. But I'm 40. I don't sound or act like a 40-year-old. It's like, and it's not, I don't mean that as a compliment. Like, oh, I look so young. No, I just mean like I act like a younger dude, and mostly it's because I'm kind of immature for my age. You know?
That's funny. Well, I think you need to be nicer to yourself. Well, Tucker, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, dude.
And we'll see you guys. Oh, where can we find you? Tell us all about where you can find you.
Company's just bookinabox.com.
Bookinabox.com.
Yep. And then website, my personal site is tuckermax.me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. And then for us, you can see us facebook.com/The Alternative Daily, on Twitter @JakeSurfs. And did I miss anything else? We have Instagram, but we'll catch us on youtube.com/The Alternative Daily. I'm terrible with that stuff.
Yeah,
but
I know. I always forget to.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Tucker. I appreciate it.
Awesome.